Australia is the oldest continuously inhabited landmass on Earth. Aboriginal Australians have been here for over 65,000 years, and their stories stretch back further than any other mythology in existence. When the Greeks were building their first temples, Aboriginal oral traditions were already ancient. The creatures in Australian folklore don't come from books or epics written by poets. They come from the Dreamtime, a framework of creation that is not a past event, but an ongoing reality, still shaping the land, the law, and the spiritual world right now. These are the mythical creatures of Australian folklore. The Rainbow Serpent is the most significant being in Aboriginal Australian mythology. It is a massive serpent associated with water, creation, and the shaping of the landscape. According to Dreamtime traditions, the Rainbow Serpent moved across the formless earth, and wherever it travelled, it carved out rivers, pushed up mountains, and gouged valleys into the ground. The waterways of Australia are the tracks it left behind. It appears under different names across dozens of language groups: Yurlungur in Arnhem Land, Ungud in the Kimberley, Wargal in the southwest. In some traditions, it protects water sources and gives life. In others, it is destructive, swallowing people who violate sacred law and causing floods when disturbed. Rock art depicting the Rainbow Serpent dates back thousands of years. It is not a myth from the past. It is a living part of Aboriginal spiritual life today. The Bunyip is the most widely known creature in Australian folklore. It lives in billabongs, creeks, swamps, and riverbeds, and descriptions vary depending on the region. Some accounts describe a massive, dark creature with flippers and a dog-like face. Others say it has a long neck, tusks, and a body covered in fur. What stays consistent is the behaviour. The Bunyip lurks in water and attacks anyone who comes too close, particularly at night. Its cry is described as a deep, booming roar that carries across still water. Aboriginal communities used the Bunyip to mark genuinely dangerous waterways. European settlers adopted the legend in the 1800s, and the word Bunyip entered Australian English permanently. Remote waterholes in the outback still carry the name. The Yara-ma-yha-who is one of the most disturbing creatures in any mythology. It comes from Aboriginal traditions and is described as a small red figure, roughly 3 to 4 feet tall, with an oversized head, a wide mouth, and no teeth. Its fingers and toes end in suckers, like an octopus. It lives in fig trees and waits for a person to rest in the shade beneath. When someone sits down, the Yara-ma-yha-who drops from the branches, attaches its suckers, and drains enough blood to leave the person weak but alive. Then it swallows them whole. After a while, it regurgitates them, alive but slightly shorter, slightly redder, and slightly less human than before. If the process is repeated enough times, the victim eventually becomes a Yara-ma-yha-who themselves. It doesn't kill you. It replaces you. The Yowie is Australia's version of Bigfoot, but the stories predate European settlement by thousands of years. Aboriginal oral traditions describe large, ape-like creatures living in the dense forests of the Great Dividing Range along Australia's eastern coast. They are described as standing between 6 and 10 feet tall, covered in dark hair, with flat faces and a powerful stench. European settlers began reporting their own encounters in the 1800s, describing massive footprints, strange howling from the bush, and brief glimpses of something enormous moving between the trees at dusk. Sightings continue today, concentrated in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales and the Gold Coast hinterland of Queensland. Australia has no native apes and no fossil record of primates. Whatever people have been seeing for thousands of years has no obvious zoological explanation. The Muldjewangk is a water creature from the Ngarrindjeri people of South Australia. It lives in the Murray River and the surrounding lakes, and it is described as a massive humanoid figure that rises from the water to grab people from the banks. Ngarrindjeri tradition holds that the Muldjewangk punishes those who disrespect the river or take more from it than they need. One account passed down through oral tradition describes a European steamboat captain in the 1800s who fired at something in the river. Within days, he reportedly developed a skin condition so severe that he died in agony. The story served as a warning. The river provides, but it also remembers. Tiddalik is a giant frog from Aboriginal mythology who drank all the water in the world. Every river, every lake, every puddle, gone. The land cracked and dried. The animals were dying of thirst. They gathered together and tried to figure out how to get the water back. They realized the only solution was to make Tiddalik laugh, because if he opened his mouth, the water would pour out. One by one, the animals tried. The wombat danced. The kookaburra sang. Nothing worked. Finally, the eel tied itself into knots so ridiculous that Tiddalik couldn't hold it in. He laughed. The water flooded out, and the rivers and lakes filled again. It sounds lighter than the other stories on this list, but its purpose is the same. Tiddalik is a warning against taking too much. One creature's greed nearly ended everything. The Whowie is a giant lizard-like creature from Aboriginal traditions in the Riverina region of New South Wales. It was described as being over 20 feet long, with 6 legs and a body like a goanna, scaled up to a monstrous size. The Whowie lived in a cave along the Murray River and emerged at night to hunt, dragging prey back into the darkness. Some tellings describe it swallowing people whole. What makes the Whowie notable is the fossil record. Australia was once home to Megalania, a real monitor lizard over 20 feet long that went extinct roughly 50,000 years ago. Aboriginal Australians were on the continent when Megalania was still alive. The Whowie may not be a myth at all. It may be a memory of something that actually hunted alongside humans, passed down through oral tradition for 50,000 years. The Min Min lights are a phenomenon reported across the Australian outback for over a century, though Aboriginal communities have spoken about them for far longer. They appear as glowing orbs that hover above the ground at night in remote areas, particularly in Western Queensland. The lights follow travellers, retreat when approached, and vanish without warning. Science has proposed bioluminescence and temperature inversions. Aboriginal traditions describe them as spirits of the dead that have not moved on, drifting through the landscape looking for something they lost. People who encounter them describe a deep unease that has nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the feeling of being watched by something they couldn't explain. Australia's mythology is the oldest on Earth, and it isn't finished. These stories aren't relics. They are part of a living culture that has been continuous for 65,000 years, longer than any civilization, any empire, any written word. The creatures in them aren't ancient history. Some of them are still being seen. Subscribe if you want to see every mythical creature from Japanese folklore explained next. And tell me in the comments which Australian creature disturbed you the most. I'll see you in that video.